Here's the scene. You've got young men and women in foxholes. Bullets flying over their head. We've got missiles. We've got bombs. And sometimes those bullets, sometimes those missiles, they hit the bodies of these young men and women. And that makes me think about that young man or that young woman that's in that foxhole. Why do they believe that they are there? So pause for a moment. I want you to set aside your personal beliefs, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, and just for a moment, put yourself in the place of that young man or woman in that foxhole as bullets are flying over their heads. Why are they there? Why is it that they believe they are there? What is it that they believe that they're fighting for? You know, I pondered that thought over and over, and I learned to set aside my own personal belief and beliefs and put myself in the shoes of each and every young man or woman that has went out and served in the armed forces. Why do they believe they're serving? They believe they're serving because they believe that they are protecting your freedom, protecting my freedom, protecting our freedom. And what I've come to believe is that we, as a people, are completely disrespecting these young men and women, veterans that have served, active military that are serving. And what about those that paid the ultimate price, the ultimate sacrifice, those that have died? I mean, we have graveyards that are filled with hundreds of thousands of bodies of those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice. For what is what I ask myself? For what is what I'm asking you? They believed in freedom. These young men and women, they took an oath to serve and to honor and to uphold our Constitution, which I believe to be the greatest legal document in the entire world. And inside of that Constitution, there's a statement that talks about giving us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right of every United States of America citizen. That's what I learned to focus on when it comes to those that have given up their life, those veterans, and those that are actively serving. I've come to focus on that's the reason that they are fighting. And yet they are being completely disrespected and dishonored at a level that most people have not even come to grips or realize. Why? Because our Constitution is being trampled continually. So I ask you to come in with me for a moment and think about some of these things that I'm talking about, because I believe this is a time that we have to make a stand and honor these young men and women and honor these soldiers, honor these veterans, young and old, inactive and active, and especially those that are deceased. We've got to honor them by upholding the Constitution. So where's the power? The power is in we, the people, must honor those who are sacrificing for the freedom that so many people are taking advantage of. So why do I say that? Well, it leads me to a critical point that is leading to the destruction of our Constitution and the dishonoring of our military forces, both the veterans, the active, and again, especially the deceased. You know, the small business owners and the business owners are the backbone of the United States of America society and economy. These folks are the ones that actually provide the jobs for the ultimate backbone of our society. The workers, the employees, the middle-class Americans, and those that are working to strive and have a better way of life. Well, it's hard to have a better way of life if we have government organizations that are continually trampling upon the U.S. citizens' rights. So we've got to come together right now and really focus again on that young man, that young woman, those soldiers, young and old, that are in those foxholes with those bullets flying over their head when I talk about what I'm going to talk about next, so that you will see how the impact of their sacrifice is being disrespected in our country right now. You know, on October the 9th, 2019, President Trump signed 2 executive orders. Executive Order 13891, which was promoting the rule of law through improved agency guidance documents, and Executive Order 13892, promoting the rule of law through transparency and fairness in civil, administrative, enforcement, and adjudication. The president was quoted, I'm going to quote the president. He was quoted as saying, "Today, we take
bold new action to protect Americans from out-of-control bureaucracy and stop regulators from imposing secret rules and hidden penalties
on the American people." For many decades, federal agencies have been issuing thousands of pages of so-called guidance documents.
A pernicious kind of regulation imposed by unaccountable bureaucrats in the form of commentary on how rules should be interpreted.
All too often, guidance documents are a backdoor for regulators to effectively change the laws and vastly expand their scope and their reach. Guidance has been frequently used to subject U.S. citizens and businesses to arbitrary and sometimes abusive enforcement actions. Stop for a second and think about what the president's saying. The person that's fighting for our freedom, our military that's fighting to protect our freedoms, really what the president is saying is we have administrative agencies that are becoming enemies to our freedoms that our military is fighting for. The president goes on to say, because of these materials and the fact that these materials are too often hidden and hard to find, many Americans learn of the rules only when federal agents come knocking on the door. This regulatory overreach gravely undermines our constitutional system of government. Unelected, key word, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats must not be able to operate outside of the democratic system of government, imposing their own private agenda on our citizens. A permanent federal bureaucracy cannot become a fourth branch of government. And I would add a note, a fourth branch becomes an enemy of we the people. It becomes an enemy of what we are fighting for, what our soldiers have fought for. The president goes on to say, unanswerable. These folks are unanswerable to American voters. In America, the people must always reign. The president went on to say that many American business owners have and are suffering absurd redefinitions and interpretations of federal bureaucrats. I say, and we should say, this has to stop. In order for us to honor our military, our veterans, our current active military forces, and please, for those that have died, we have to say this has to stop. Why is this so important? Why am I taking the time to record this? Because if we don't have these freedoms, it literally is intrusive on every one of our other freedoms, as people are beginning to say. Well, President Trump then introduced several small business owners at his press conference on October 9th, 2019, to share their horror stories from the treatment these governmental regulatory agencies literally forced on them. The president brought up a gentleman by the name of Andy Johnson, which is a small business owner from Wyoming. Mr. Johnson applied for a stock pond permit on his own property.
When I applied for a stock pond permit for my private property, I had no idea that the EPA would come knocking at my door and threaten me and my family.
Civilly, criminally, and was fining this man
$37,500 per day. The fines were up to $16 million.
$16 million before help stepped in. A civil liberties organization stepped in to help him. Richard Schrock was then introduced by the president, and he operates a family-owned business in Fairbanks, Alaska. He purchased some land
for our business about 20 years ago so we could move operations out of town to the new facility and expand our facilities.
He says that he's now spent the better part of over 10 years
We've spent the better part of 10 years and over $300,000
fighting with regulatory agencies over his own land. He says that the last straw
was when we lost our appeal in the Ninth Circuit Court, when they held that the agencies can make
that these governmental agencies can make up their own regulations the way they want and the requirements that they want without congressional approval or oversight. That means it's stepping outside what our military forces are fighting for. My question to you is, how can this be? This is not constitutional. As a matter of fact, it's unconstitutional. The president went on to introduce Mr. Kevin Lenny, which is a third-generation cattle rancher at the Point Reyes National Seashore in California. Several years ago, Mr. Reyes was also one of the owners of Drake's Bay Oyster Farm,
a sustainable family business where we produced nearly half of all the oysters in the state of California.
In 2014, the regulatory agency called the National Park Service launched a National Environmental Policy Act process that cost Kevin's company millions of dollars and lasted over 8 years.
That cost millions of dollars and lasted over 8 years, and the National Park Service forced our oyster farm out of business.
Forced their oyster farm business out of business. And if that wasn't enough for them and their family and the community, today, the rest of the agriculture businesses, which includes about another 24 ranching family farm businesses within the National Seashore, are facing the exact same process. It's ridiculous. Mr. Lenny goes on to state, something has to be done about
federal agencies that have pre-decided what they want before the process has begun.
And something must be done about professional governmental litigation attorneys in these governmental agencies that abuse the process, that step outside of what's called due process, I should add. Now, after these folks were introduced, President Trump states, I quote, when Americans
and their businesses are sued by government agencies, they're sometimes not even given an explanation of what they do wrong and how they can fix it. No American should ever face such persecution from their own government.
Stop and think about that for a second. Persecution from our own government? Is that what our soldiers have fought for and are fighting for? Do you see now where I'm talking about the amount of disrespect that is happening with our military? This has to stop. Back to the president.
Today I'm taking action to stop it. My first executive order will require agencies to publish guidance documents online so that small businesses and everyday citizens can easily find them.
Agencies will have to seek public input on the most important guidance, and the whole process will be closely overseen by the White House. Americans will no longer, I want to underline, will no longer be subject
to the rules of hidden games that are played on the public.
The second order, the president states, is that he says, I will sign today will protect the citizens from secret interpretations of regulations.
Unexpected penalties and violations of their rights.
From now on, underline, from now on, agencies will be required
To inform individuals about any case against them and respond to their arguments. It will be the agency's duty to fully educate small businesses about new regulatory changes.
The president went on to say, today's action is just the latest step in my administration's tireless fight to curtail job-killing, soul-crushing regulations. Think about what happens when our own government persecutes we the people unjustly. That's why the president had to stop and take time to sign an executive order. The president then introduces the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, Mr. Russ Vought. Mr. Russ Vought goes on to state, "Thank you, Mr. President." I'm gonna quote him. "Thank you, Mr. President."
As a result of your leadership, today we're making a major step forward in the effort to drain the swamp and to get our arms wrapped around the administrative state. We can't do that until we know all of the dark regulatory stealth regulation that is out there.
Now think about this for a second before I go on to finish his quote. Why is Mr. Vought, the acting director of the OMB, why is he stating about the dark stealth regulation that is out there? It must be a massive problem for them to stop and take time to have an executive order. And I believe that's one of the key reasons why our military is being so disrespected. Mr. Vought goes on to state, and I quote, and that's one
of the reasons why we're asking all agencies to be putting on their website, on a searchable website, all of these regulations so that we can understand what it is.
So that we can understand what it is, we the people, right? And anything that's not put up there is rescinded. It's void. Mr. Vought then states, secondly,
we want to make sure that the American people, families and small businesses, are no longer bullied by their federal government.
Are no longer bullied by their federal government. Can you imagine, as I stop right here in the middle of this quote, can you imagine him having to take the time to even talk about our own government having agencies that are actually bullying, terrorizing at times the people of the USA? It's out of control. It has to be out of control for there to be an executive order to curtail this. Let's get back to Mr. Vought and his quote. He says,
we've all had to deal with the motor vehicle department down the street from us.
Sometimes that could take us forever and is a headache, right? He says, think about dealing with the federal government. It's an entirely different situation. And the people that are here today, those 3 business owners who the president earlier introduced, who have flown in on their own dime to be a part of this celebration, can attest to that. We want to make sure that there are no stories again of people being bullied by their federal government. Mr. Vought concludes with,
so we're thrilled that you took this on, Mr. President. Looking forward to these executive orders. Thank you.
So here we have the president of the entire country and the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget taking time for the president to sign executive orders to stop this madness. Why am I taking time to share this with you today? Because I'm personally being terrorized by my own government. And it's been going on for about 20 years. And it's been hidden in these dark corners and these stealth regulations that me, as a US citizen, I haven't been able to understand. And so I want to bring it to light, as Mr. Vought challenged us with his words to do. I not only want to bring it to light, I want to share the disrespect of our military by not bringing it to light. You know, we've got to stop and do something about this. I mean, you got to think about the families. You see, I can talk about my own company to where January 13, 2020, I had thousands of families that were wrecked unnecessarily, unrightfully by our own government, by an agency. As President Trump says, what, a fourth branch is something that we can't have, yet we're finding that it's existing. You know, I've got staff members, I've got employees, I've got contractors, I've got affiliates from all around this country and also around the globe that have been impacted in such a negative way that has really forced me to think about that person, that soldier, that young man or woman, that lieutenant, even the generals who are leading our armed forces in the past, present, and also in the future. I've had to stop and take time and go, this has got to stop. This disrespect has got to come to an end. When you think about people on my own staff being affected, they represent multiple cultures, multiple races, and more importantly, they represent multiple families, actual families. When you think about affiliates within my company that represent thousands upon thousands of people that can have their life upended by stealth, dark regulations without any due process. So my challenge today is, let's stand for the Constitution. We the people, let's come together. It's not just my business. It could be your business, and it may be your business. I'm challenging today any business that's had to suffer under these unbelievable regulations and this bullying by agencies within the government, that you stand up and that you speak out. We're reaching out to civil liberties organizations, civil rights organizations, and we're asking you to stand up and speak out. We're asking you to come together once and for all to bring to light this darkness that has been taking place. And I'm respectfully challenging and requesting that the president that signed the executive orders, that you help us, we the people, that you help the business owners, some of the strongest backbone of the country, the small business owners who's had this intrusion take place in their lives that has destroyed thousands of families all over the country. Not only am I calling on the president to help, I'm calling on the Senate. I'm calling on the House of Representatives. I'm calling on the governors of every state. I'm calling on the mayors of every city around our country to come together to honor and to enforce the executive orders of the president, to make sure that our military is no longer disrespected in this fashion ever again. If this has hit you in your heart where it should have hit you, then I'm asking you to take personal responsibility, to share this message in as many places that you can, to call on your local leaders, to say, let's do something about it, to organize. So we put together a website. It's at www.civilrightsmoment.com. Civilrightsmoment.com. Why do we name it civilrightsmoment.com? Because this is the moment that we should stand for our civil rights. This is the moment that we should honor our military and what they're fighting for. If you ultimately look at it, the military, our veterans, the active military, and those that have gave up their lives, what are they fighting for? They really are fighting for our civil rights. The right to have life, the right to have liberty, freedom, and the right to pursue happiness. Why is it so few people actually can feel the freedom that they should have? Why is it so few people that are actually experiencing happiness? Could it be because our own government has administrative branches within it that are causing people to be miserable? And that has to stop. When? At this moment. So I challenge you to take advantage of this moment to honor our military. I'm thinking about those soldiers in that foxhole with those bullets flying over their heads, with some of them losing limbs, some of them losing life. I'm thinking about them, and I'm going to honor them through speaking up and doing everything within my power to be a voice like you can be a voice, to honor what they have been fighting for and what they fought for. Never again should we dishonor them. Right now is the civil rights moment. Right now is the time to honor them. I challenge you, I challenge myself to not let this moment go by. This is our moment. This is our time. Let's do it together. Thank you.